What's going on, Babylonians? It's me, Songs of Rage, and I am back to be able to bring another Diablo 4 build your way. Now today we're going to be discussing over the rogue character, and we're going to be discussing a ranged version of their build, allowing us to be able to use penetrating shot to maximum effectiveness. Now this also does combine in a technical review, which is going to be to do with the Wind Force, which is a sacred unique bow, and it's a lot of fun to be able to mess about with. The interesting part is that it has the chance to be able to do double damage and knockback on a target, so we're going to try and maximize the best to be able to get out of this. And just so you know, at level 65 I have hit a 300,000 damage hit, which was more than enough to be able to wipe out anything that was basically in front of me. But if you did enjoy this video, then make sure to drop a like and a subscribe so you can find us ready for more Diablo 4 content. But with all that said and done, what are we waiting for? Let's get right into it. Alright, so first and foremost, we always cover the skill tree, and it's important to be able to go through this because this is how we're going to maximize it as much as possible. To be able to do this, we're going to be going through into marksman abilities, and there's no better place to be able to start than it's going to be the well-trusted Puncture. Now, Puncture is a great ability. It's a great way to be able to do damage up close. It's a great way to be able to do damage at distance as well, especially into a group of enemies, and it's also a great way to be able to get energy back. With Puncture, we're going to go for Enhanced to be able to get even more energy from crowd control, and Fundamental to be able to throw out 3 blades, and also has a chance to be able to make them vulnerable when we do hit 2 or more an enemy with 2 or more blades, which is great, and it's definitely going to help with the DPS of this build. Going from there, though, we do then go into the next tree. Obviously, we're not going to be picking up Twisting Blades because this is a ranged version, so we will be putting a couple of points into Sturdy, 1 point into Sturdy and 3 points into Siphoning Strikes, allowing us to be able to keep healthy and nice and healed, but we will be picking up Penetrating Shot and 5 points straight into there. This allows us to be able to do some insane amount of damage, especially when we do it with combo points, which is the specialization we are using for this build. And then we do have the enhanced one to be able to deal 10% increased damage per enemy that this shot will pierce, and then also improved penetration shot to be able to, if we damage at least 3 enemies with 1 shot, our next one will have a 20% increased critical strike chance, allowing us to be able to constantly go through enemies, go through mobs, to be able to do massive amounts of damage. We will be moving on from there, and we will be picking up Caltrops. Now, I do enjoy the ability of Caltrops. Being able to throw some Caltrops on the floor to be able to do damage, and also slow enemies, is a great way to be able to put up a choke point, and you can stand behind this to be able to protect yourself, so enemies have to run through it to be able to take debuffs. We also go for the modifiers of Enhanced Caltrops, so they take extra damage the longer they are inside of Caltrops, and we'll be explaining how we're going to get the most out of that as well. We'll also be using Methodical to be able to do cold damage and chill enemies for 20% per second. This is going to be important a little bit later on in the build, but just keep that in mind for the time being. We will also be putting 3 points into Weapon Mastery to be able to increase the amount of damage we will be doing. In this case, because of the bow that we are using, this means that we're going to get a 12% increased damage to vulnerable enemies, and because we are equipped 2 swords, we are getting a flat 18% increased damage as well. Moving on from there, we have grabbed Poison Trap, and Poison Trap's going to be the other way that we're going to use to be able to combine with Caltrops so we do more damage to certain enemies. Poison Trap on its own is going to do a decent amount of damage, but the real reason as to why is going to be Enhanced, which allows us to be able to knock down enemies when it activates for 1.5 seconds, keeping them inside of Caltrops, and also using as a really good mine ready to be able to trigger, as well as countering Poison Trap, allowing us to have a 30% chance to be able to reset our imbuement skill cooldowns when activated. As standard, we have put 3 points into Exploit for increased damage to healthy and injured, and 3 points into Malice to be able to do even more damage to vulnerable enemies. Moving on from there, the only one that we will be picking up in terms of imbuments is going to be Shadow. This is going to be the best way to be able to take out mobs rather than single target damage, and it's also a great way to be able to start applying our vulnerable. We do also have Enhanced Shadow Imbuement to be able to get an extra increased critical strike chance against injured, but this doesn't tend to come into place until we start struggling a little bit with the build. And then we also have Blended, so when we detonate enemies with the explosions from Shadow, we will be applying vulnerable to a bunch of them. We have also put 1 point into Shadow Crash to be able to get a chance to stun, and 2 points into Consuming Shadows to be able to keep our energy topped up. We also have 3 points in Precision Imbuement, allowing us to be able to have that extra 9% increased critical strike chance, allowing us to be able to land more consecutive critical shots, increasing the amount of DPS we put out. We do have 3 points into Frigid Finesse, and we do also have something in my gear that allows us to be able to have an extra 2 points. This means that we do 25% increased damage to chilled enemies, which is where Caltrops kind of comes in, and we do 50% extra damage to frozen enemies, which is another part of the actual gear that we do currently have equipped. Moving on from there, we have picked up Shadow Clone. We only need the 1 point in here because this is absolutely amazing. This allows us to be able to put out 2 poison traps. This allows us to be able to throw out 2 caltrops, which all benefit from the abilities that we have gone with the modifications. We don't need to be able to go any further because we already do plenty amount of damage, and 2 points for 20% is just not that much. We have gone for 1 point in Innovation to be able to get some chance of being able to get some energy, and 3 points into Second Wind, and 3 points into Alchemist's Fortune to be able to increase the amount of lucky hit chances that we have while we go through energy and while we have our imbuments. We do have 2 points in Trap Mastery, allowing us to be able to, every single time our trap is activated, increasing our critical strike chance against vulnerable and crowd control enemies by 8%. Just know that it doesn't have to be enemies that are within the trap. It can, as long as the trap gets activated, this accounts for every single enemy that exists in the world. We also have 1 point into Adrenaline Rush, allowing us to be able to have extra energy, but the real reason is because we've gone for 3 points into Haste, allowing us to have movement speed to be able to get out the way, and should we dip down in our energy, we have faster attack speeds. The last point that we will be putting is going to be in Precision, allowing us to be able to use our marksman skills, which is going to be Puncture, as well as our Penetrating Shot, to be able to start stacking up critical strike damage per every single stack that we have, up to a maximum of 20%, and when we reach that maximum precision, our next skill is a guaranteed critical strike that deals 40% increased critical strike damage to then consume all the stacks of Precision. Overall, this build is all about critical strikes and being able to start debuffing enemies, and then being able to use shadow damage to be able to then start taking through mobs, and it's also very good at being able to go through bosses. In terms of Paragon, it's very similar to how we currently have with our melee kind of not necro, but melee rogue, and this means that we are going for being able to go through prime. Feel free to be able to choose how you've currently got it, but in terms of the boards, I've gone for the first glyph of being able to do extra damage to crowd control enemies, which is especially important for most rogue builds. We've then also gone for the imbuement skill to be able to grab that and be able to do extra damage with those, and then we've also gone for the crowd control one, and I'm starting to work my way towards cheap shot. In terms of specialization, we have gone for combo points to be able to increase the amount of damage that our penetrating shot will be doing, and as you can see, the amount that we will be getting is absolutely insane, almost doubling everything that we will be doing just for being able to throw out 3 punctures. But then we'd have a look at our gear, and most of this hasn't really changed from the moment. A lot of this does get transferred because we are doing a lot of vulnerable damage, we are doing a lot of critical strike damage, so not much has really changed when it comes to that. The only thing that I have swapped out are going to be the amulet, allowing us to be able to do extra damage per second for while we stand still, up to 30%. This means I can just stand here for 2 seconds, and I would already have got a nice 30% increase. We've got things to be able to increase our armor and damage reduction and all that, but Frostburn is going to be especially useful in this one, allowing us to be able to have a chance to instantly freeze enemies, allowing us to get that maximum damage potential. And then we've also gone for Wind Force, and Wind Force allows us to be able to have that chance to be able to deal double damage and knock back on a target, which is just insane. Granted, this isn't very consistent, but Wind Force, because of the amount of we've put into lucky hits, it does technically even out, and it is actually quite reliable in that sense. The last one that we do need, and main aspects that we will need to be able to focus on, is going to be on our legendary sword, where whenever penetrating shot damages an enemy, 2 additional arrows split off from the side, dealing a decent amount of damage, but then these do not split. This allows us to be able to go through mobs, so we can fire 1 single arrow through the center, and then every single time we hit someone, they fire off arrows from the side of it, taking on the properties of the imbuements that we also have taken, so that means we do get to be able to spread around our shadow a lot more efficiently. In terms of gems, it's just pretty much standard. It's going to be a couple of topazes to be able to increase the amount of, just in case we do get taken away from our control, so we are reducing the amount of damage. We've gone for rubies to be able to increase the amount of HP that we have. We've also gone for emeralds to be able to increase the amount of vulnerable damage that we will be doing, which is essential with this build. I'm just missing one last one to be able to make this perfected. And then we've also got some diamonds to be able to give ourselves some nice resistance. Overall, this is an absolutely stunning build, and I'm having so much fun being able to see those massive damage numbers appearing. Just know that obviously this is very dependent, the bigger numbers are very dependent on Wind Force, but you can still put out more than enough damage just in this build in of itself, and I'd be interested to see how this one works compared to the other unique that we do get access to, allowing us to be able to have a consistent critical shot every single time we hit an enemy for the first time. If you don't have Wind Force, feel free to be able to swap out for any other bow that you do have. Just feel free to go for things like, as long as you have a massive amount of dexterity, it doesn't necessarily have to be a bow, it can be a crossbow, just know that you will be firing a little bit slower, but they do tend to be able to hit a little bit harder as well, and they do have the better multipliers, considering they have things like vulnerable damage as standard, and then they start murking things as well. So anyway, that pretty much wraps up the build, and it brings you the whole template in terms of how I've managed to set up my ranged rogue. I will definitely be testing around a little bit more with this. I will definitely be see if there's any ways to kind of improve this even further than it currently does. I'm sure there is a way, and I'm definitely going to be on my lookout to be able to find the right pieces. But anyway, that wraps it all up, so let me know in the comment section down below, how do you find the ranged rogue? Is this something that you're interested in being able to play? And do you prefer it over the cookie cutter, which is the meta Twisted Blades kind of build? Do you like being able to mix it up every now and then? Massive thank you for making your way to the end of the video. Massive thank you to the Babylonian family, as always, for their continued support. It really does help the channel out. If you did enjoy this video, then make sure to drop a like and subscribe so you can find us ready for more Diablo 4 content. But with all that said and done, that just leaves me to say, keep yourself safe, keep yourselves well, and I'll see you all on the next video.